buttons. All right. So just as a introduction for those here who, maybe saw the link, saw Toon Boom, and were like, yeah, I want to learn that stuff. So my name is Megan, Little Digits Online, but I've been working with Toon Boom and specifically character rig animation for a while, like 15 years-ish at least. Lately I haven't done as much character animation, but it is something I really like to come back to. I like to teach it. I like to make this program accessible for others because it can be intimidating and it can have a lot of, there's a lot that it can do that even I don't know. I don't know how to do it. But I want to try to pass on how I understand it to be, to hopefully make the program more accessible and for people to have fun with it. So I've worked on shows, mostly the one that most people know me for is Hilda, because I was on that for a long time. But a lot of my animation is very centered around like more traditional, fuller Disney style kind of stuff. I worked on a preschool show called Toot and Puddle when I first started in animation, and I worked on Jake and Neverland Pirates and Lion Guard and Tangle the series. So a lot of how I teach Toon Boom is really paired with traditional animation principles and making sure that we're not losing those traditional principles in the technology of the program, because really it's they go hand in hand. I am someone who is I'm not as techy as some other people in Toon Boom. My stuff is very simple. And I'm someone who I don't need to use super complex rigs. So for those of you who maybe find rigs intimidating, you're overwhelmed by the amount of tech stuff in Toon Boom, hopefully I can make it easier for you. And we are going to do this step by step. So this first lesson is going to be focusing on really the basics of Toon Boom, but trying to explain in a casual sense the important points that you need to focus on. As a character animator or someone using Toon Boom, what options do I need to hone in on, and what ones can I throw out the window, and at least maybe for now, and come back to them later. So yeah, this first lesson, we are going to be talking about pegs specifically and the connection between the node view, the camera, and the timeline. If the node view is something that scares you, if you don't know how to interact with it, if you're not sure, you're in the right place. Because that's something that the best character animators I know in Toon Boom Harmony know how to work a rig, know how to adjust a rig and kind of break a rig and all that stuff. And for people who are really good at rigging, they understand the workflow of the animators, understand that rigs should be made to the style of the show. So all of these things are always paired together. You can't use the drawing aspect of it or the traditional animation aspect of it. A good rig is a great tool and needs to be made a certain way, but a rig does not make good animation. Animation principles make good animation, and you can use tools like any program to help you get that. It's the medium of delivery, but you can't. It's never going to make up for it. So, but the hard thing is what are the technical things we do want to keep? And one of the main things animating in Toon Boom is knowing how to fix the things it can't do, but knowing what it can do for you. So we're going to start really simple, And I'm just going to do a quick little tour for those of you who maybe haven't used the program or maybe just like briefly used the program, and just go over the main areas that you're going to want to be working in. So the camera view is obviously your main view. This is where anything that's in the node view here will show up in the camera view. So we have well, if I had a camera attached to this, I could also move it around, but I don't. But it will show up here. So this is where you're doing your drawing, and also where your selected drawings you can move around the screen. We have our node view, which seems scary. It does, but it is not scary, because ultimately, and we're just going to start at level 1, which is drawings and pegs. And the way I see it is the drawing is your drawing. The drawing is your drawing, and the peg is the handle. So when I have the drawing selected, you can see that it's pink in the camera. And when I was in school, we were always told, if it's pink, stop and think. Because while the drawing is this, it's like an object, but it can also store information on it. It's like this little information box that not only has the drawing you have, but you can add other drawings to it in your library. Right now we have drawing submission 1, and you have drawing submission 2. He's sad. Aw. So the drawing can contain the different cells. But ultimately, for good workflow, you want to make sure that any manipulation you are doing to this drawing, squashing, stretching, rotating it, all of that stuff, any sort of movement on the camera with your transform tool, you want to make sure you have that peg selected. And every time you move it, that movement information is stored on the peg. It's stored on whatever you have selected, but we can see the connection through the camera and what is selected in the node view. Now, there's another place where it is also selected, and that's down in the timeline here. So I'm going to use, well, I don't really have to use my central selection tool. There's not a lot of items. But you will see here down the timeline here, I'll make a different color. Yeah. So if I go to frame 10, I have my peg selected. I have my little smile yellow, because if it's yellow, you're a good fellow. If it's pink, stop and think. Be proud of me, Toon Boom teachers. I'll never forget. So I'm going to move it, and you see how it immediately puts a keyframe on the timeline. You can keyframe at any time on the timeline, but when you move something, it automatically records that movement, and it's going, okay, you want to move screen right? Cool, I've logged that information away on this singular peg. And you can see it selected here, here, and it also will be selected in the timeline. So that's really like the main understanding, because if you don't understand how pegs work, if you don't understand that everything you do in the camera, all of this movement is tracked by the program and logged on to the timeline. If you don't understand that, you're going to have a very hard time fixing things that explode. And one of the main things I see that hold people back from being really creative in Toon Boom is the fear of fixing something, of going into an animation that's exploding and not knowing how to fix it, or getting to the end of animation that, you know, maybe, you know, you're really proud of, but you don't know how you got there, and you're like, oh, I just hope I don't get notes, because I hope nobody looks under the hood of this scene because it's a mess, which is that's never going to go away. That happens. But you want to minimize it as much as possible. You want to have more room for animation, and you want to have less time just fixing, right? You want to be creative, you want to have fun, you don't want to be fixing and exploding rigs. So I always come back, and this is why I explain, like, first lesson basics, we're talking about pegs, and we're just talking about how pegs connect with node view, camera, and our timeline. All right. So this is where, with one peg, it's just not that big of a deal, right? It's when you start to put pegs on top of each other is when it starts to get a little tricky. Oh, okay, awesome question. I will take a little. If it was overwhelming, I was getting tons of questions. I'd probably save a few to the end, but like I'll totally answer your question now. So no. When you work with a character, do you draw rough animation before work with the rig, or do you set keys in late and then adjust and improve result? 100% draw rough animation beforehand. Oftentimes too, when I'm keying or drawing poses, I still draw over top. I am always adjusting. With Toon Boom, you have to assume that it's going to be stiffer the more you use the program. So you always have to like loosen yourself up. Always bring the drawing hand over top of your work at various stages. So I don't do that all the time. Sometimes I'm under a deadline and I just use my instincts. But if you want to practice doing like next level stuff in Toon Boom, like you got to do the hand drawn animation stuff. You can still use tweens, and we're gonna go over keys later. So on that note, it won't be until a few lessons down the line, but I will be going over how to really flesh out your keys in Toon Boom, and also how to do lip sync with your keys. So I do that all the time, where I lip sync. I do my key lip sync and my face lip sync as I flesh out my animation. I don't do it as a pass after. So we will dig into that as well. But I hope that answers your question for now and gives you something to look forward to. Okay, so pegs. So here's the thing that messes most people up, and is when we start putting different pegs on top of each other. So here we have our drawing. Let's say on the first peg, and I got the first one selected here, and I'm gonna name it squash and stretch. This one's gonna be rotation, and this one's gonna be left to right. Okay, so pegs are great to separate like motions on, and this is something we're going to get into a little bit later too, where like I will have a lesson set up for pegging runs and walks, but I really want to drive home just the thought process of pegs. So I'm going to take my little transform tool, squash and stretch. I'm just going to do this. Bloop. On the next one, I'm going to add rotation, so I'm going to parent up. Now I'm parenting up. I'm going to rotate it. Whee! And now I'm going to go one above that, and left to right. So I'm just going to move it over like there. Okay. So now I have keyframe 1 and I have keyframe 2, and this is what we have. Now, if I was to tween it on the top peg, here, let me, colors are so handy. I'll make this one green. A gray, yeah, okay. So let's open it up. So you can actually see right here in the timeline, each one of these pegs tweened. We have the left, the right tweened, we have the rotation tweened, and we have the squash and stretch tweened. Now, generally when you tween things, you are not tweening each one individually. you're collapsing the peg and then you are tweening it. So I work on the top peg all the time. So because you want to have every peg move. These are just 3 pegs, but not everything has just 3 pegs. So you want to work with like a closed peg so that everything moves at the same time and you can give everything the same timing. So when I tween it, this is what it looks like. Now that's kind of weird, right? Like if I didn't, like, let's say I didn't want the rotation. Let's say I just wanted, it's gonna zip off screen, right? But I'm tweening it and there's a rotation in there. Oh, well, I can open up that peg and without changing the tweens on the things I like, I can take out the thing I don't like, which is the rotation. So I'm going to delete that. And now it just goes left to right. And it's got the squash and stretch. And it works how I want my brain. It wants it to work, right? So you need to understand that when you are opposing things, when you are adjusting things in the, the node view and the pegs, it's recording that. But you can fix it. All it is just a bit of an adjustment on a peg. So I'm gonna, all right. I have a little list of like all the things I want to do. Okay, but does that make sense for those watching about the me asking for engagement? I wish I had, like, when I do Teams meetings, I'm always like, throw out little emojis so I know I'm not talking to nothing. But this concept of being able to, whenever you have a peg selected, it records stuff. So it's easy for me to do now because I have the node view up. I can tell when I have my drawing selected, I parent up, squash and stretch, rotation. But what if I don't have the node view up? And I'm just clicking away or whatever, and I select something and I parent up and I go, oh gosh, okay, I'm gonna put squash and stretch on the squash and stretch peg. Okay, okay, parent up, cool, and put some squash and stretch on. Oh, I was on the squash and stretch peg. Oops, I meant to pair up more. I meant to be a bad example. What my point is like, sometimes there are multiple pegs stacked, but just by the camera, you don't know what peg you have selected. So this is something for you to be aware of because it will directly affect if you have flips or if you have like a mistake or something went wrong. If you're not paying attention to how you're affecting the pegs, it's going to make it harder for you to fix stuff. Okay, so let's turn this back on. Also, where's my water? It's over here. Whoa, it's loud. Okay. So this is, oh, right here. Here we go. Hydrate. I need to hydrate. I've been running around this morning. It was so cold, my heater decided to turn off for some reason, so it was really chilly. And my poor naked cat was so cold. She wasn't completely naked. She had a sweater on. Okay. So let's talk about complex pegs. So something like this can look really, really intimidating to people. This is the Hellraiser rig. Where's my little, here we go. Here's the little Brooks, but in 2D. Thank you, friend, for the rig. It's a free rig. You can download it on Gumroad. It's very cool. I toss some money their way because I loves me a good free rig. But a lot of people, this has master controllers in it, which I will say like are a next level of rigging. For me, I personally, well, I don't know how to rig with master controllers anyway, but I'm a fairly simple rig person. But one thing I want to drive home, because I think to be a good animator with Toon Boom, you do need to know the basics of rigging. But what those basics mostly are, when we zoom in, again, ignoring these little nodes here. Where is your drawing? Where is your peg? Okay, so you can see if you start to analyze rigs a little bit, just how the hierarchies work. So right now we have the neck, which parents up again to this the shirt piece, which parents up again to the whole body. But you can, it's just like a little stacked system of, you know, the leg bone's connected to the shin bone, I'm not gonna sing the song, I'm gonna embarrass myself, but like that's the concept. Like, you ultimately, beside the things like, I'll kind of explain a little bit, but line art, overlay, those are just the art layers. Auto patches are things, well, actually most of these little nodes are basically saying, hey, use the color art this way, cut the line art that way, apply the deformer to the drawing. You got some deformers in here. So it's saying, okay, here's your drawing, here's your peg, but here's your deformer on it. So there are a lot of extras in Toon Boom rigs, but when you're just starting off, you do not need to know all that stuff. As long as you know the concept of, you know, just drawing attached to peg, attached to another peg, you know, you can kind of work your way up. Different rigs have different parenting style. Some of them have a gentle parenting style. But, you know, everybody makes them a little differently. So, you know, you will find, you know, the rigs you prefer and how you like to work. But I really recommend not being afraid to mess around. Maybe starting off, I make a little Kirby, you know, something very simple. But yeah, okay, so next. So let's tween. I did these little poses here. 1, 2. Okay. I'm gonna tween them just to kind of give you an example again of like, we can't trust our eyes in Toon Boom. And that's one thing that as artists, like it surprises people, right? When they pose a character, and I'm gonna flip between here and here. You see this character. You know, she's just raising her hand, just hello, you know, whatever. We expect it to move a certain way, right? We go, oh yes, this is simple. It should move from here to here. So why does it do this? And if you don't have a clean workflow and harmony, and if you're in your final animation stage and this is happening, all that means is that you just need to learn a few clean posing tricks. But that's workflow oriented. And I guarantee you, if you adjust your workflow and you know what causes these flips, and we're going to talk about this stuff, then you can make your life so much easier, because this happens more, maybe not to this extent, but it is the surprises that make people nervous and intimidated to animate. Because when you're hit with this sudden, like, oh, I don't know how I caused it and I don't know how to fix it, you're not having fun animating anymore. You're just stressing out that you need to fix something and you're not quite sure. So let's talk about I was gonna do pros and do and don'ts for the next one, but I think what I'm gonna do is just go through at least the basics, and then I'll repeat it next time, because we love a good repeat lesson. Because I have time. I think I have time. I do want to go over after this. I want to go over timing. So yeah, we'll do this. Okay. So let me copy paste. Oh, actually, I'm just gonna delete this second post. What am I doing? So I'm gonna go through my posing do's and don'ts. These are things that I would say, like, put it down to rules, because they're technical rules. My posing do's and don'ts have nothing to do with like the artistry. They have everything to do with analyzing and understand the program and what it can do to make my animation work. I have to, the way I work basically is I take so long on my posing, or longer on my posing. I invest in my posing. I draw new pieces. I add new deformers. I adjust all this stuff. Because ideally, the more you work in Toon Boom, the more good workflow you have up front, the easier your animation should be. It should go, unless you have something like really complex, but it should go faster the further into the scene you get. If you find that you slow down the further into the scene you get, and you find mistakes, that's a good indication that you need to invest in the front end, because Toon Boom needs that. The artist part of me wants to just like rip her ahead. Like, I can draw this faster. But if you slow down and understand the technical part, future self will love you. They will love you so much. So let's go over it. For those of you who use Toon Boom, you may know some of this before, but this is just like my checklist. So where are we? Okay. One of the first things is when you move something in Toon Boom, you want to work with the big pegs down. So, and this isn't, it obviously depends on workflow. You can not do this, but it's tricky. But ultimately what that means is you don't want to move things individually. So if I was to move the arm and, have it go in a wave, I would not move the hand, and kind of do it in this PC sort of way, because the program doesn't know what to do with that. It's gonna do its best, but it's yeah. Okay, so if we were moving the arm, and just the arm, you would move the biggest peg first. Because again, this is a stacked, system. So I'm going to move this arm master here, and then put that there, and then I will change the hand. These are some nice hand cells. Look at that good rotation. Oh, it's so good. Bless people who don't just have a bunch of random hands, but like have a good rotation, because there's always an angle of hand that you need. Okay, do that, whatever. Okay, and then that will move that way. So always move from the largest peg down. And that means if you're doing someone's walking, you do this peg, and then you go down to the waist, and then you go down to the legs. Like, this one's a fairly, straightforward rule. But make sure you're not moving things individually. You are moving it in like the puppet way first. It may seem a little flat, but that's totally fine. You want things to look boring and flat and not flippy to start. I always say you got to be boring with Toon Boom before you can be like good with Toon Boom. Like, you got to have a clean workflow first, and then you can build on it and break stuff. But I'm going to teach you how to be clean first. So the other thing is to move the rig how you would expect it to move in your animation. There is going to be a difference if... do that. However you rotate this thing is what the computer's gonna do. Like, it doesn't know what way you want the arm to arc up. If you rotate it 6 to 10 times, it's gonna animate it rotating basically that whole thing, right? It's really... he's doing his best to please you. It really is. So make sure you are moving it in a way you expect it to move. Okay. Now let me go back to, where am I? I am doing a little impromptu. I'm not following my lesson plan, but it's fine. Okay. Pay attention to what peg you're flipping on. We did talk about that. We did talk about make sure what peg you're on. Next lesson, we're gonna go over a head flip and how to fix a head flip. Okay, and then my other sort of rule of thumb, and this is something that's like I wouldn't say creative, but I would say is my personal little rule in order to push my animation. And that is, if you touch something on a peg, so our master, I rotate it up. If you touch something on a peg, you have to touch everything underneath that just a little bit. Just a little bit. So, I mean, it can be a lot, it can be a little, but what that means is we are not relying just on rotations. Now, it could mean a little bit of a deformer if it has it. It could mean maybe it's a little swash and stretch, or a little skewing, or, something like that. And it is one of those things that I would say, in a very small, nuanced way, may not make that big of a deal. I'm not saying you need to go ham on everything all the time. But for me, that is just my habit because, well, part of the place where I work, Mercury, it's, they want things to be more, well, the way I kind of see it is with squash and stretch, it all depends on muscle definition, but that is the thought process I have with a rig, because ultimately, and this is what I would recommend, you write down on your post-it notes if you want to take your rig animation to the next level, the rig is not the character. The rig is the tool. This little Hellraiser is the character, but this is the rig. The appeal of the character relies on me as an artist. Otherwise, I'm just moving pieces around a rig. So I want to draw, I want to do model sheets, I want to understand the proportions of this character. I want to push it past the limits. Obviously, there's going to be times where people will be like, no, don't do that. Please don't touch the rig. Please just use, there's some jobs where they won't even let you in the node view. They're like, don't touch the node view, which I would go nuts with because I add stuff all the time. I draw my own parts. I'll add my own deformers. If something isn't right for my animation, I will mess with it. But expectations are what they are, and sometimes you can't mess with this stuff. But if you're learning on your own, if you touch something on a peg, touch everything underneath it a little bit. And I will say that in our next lesson and going into fleshing out posing and keys, you won't have to do it as much, because if you do it with your main poses, like let's say your scene has 3 poses, if you keep that thought process with all 3 of those poses, that means any sort of keyframe or asset or rotation or whatever that you use from your in-betweens with your tweens will reflect that flexibility. So you actually, it's really only in the posing phase you need to do it because it should be reflected throughout the rest of your work. So, okay. Where are we next? Okay. We're gonna move on to timing, methinks. We talked a little bit about like the technicalities of the node view, and I think it's just like really understand the concept of that, because we're gonna start, in the future talking about like how do we fix things? How do we like when is a flip acceptable versus when is it not? It's when you choose to do it. It's acceptable when you choose to do it. That's it. That's the answer. But it can get a little technical, and if you don't understand that, yeah, that's fine. It's just knowing that it is a skill you need to understand. If it's something you're iffy about, that's a sign that you need to learn about it, because to me, this isn't a... It's what's going to separate certain animators from others, is their ability to understand and utilize the node view and not be intimidated by it. So it's just a good skill overall. It made a world of difference in my life as an animator. And it was only until like getting a little afraid of breaking out of my box did I learn a little bit more about it. Okay. So I'm going to turn this off. We're going to go back to our little friend. And now we are going to talk about timing. So this is also something that you need to understand. You don't have to do timing like me. I'm going to go over a timing technique that me and a lot of people I know use. It basically says no to the Bezier curves. I'm not a Bezier curve person. But please keep in mind, like if my techniques or my workflow don't work for you, that's fine. Because I'm not out here being like, you need to animate like me and that's how you get successful. It's like, no, I just want to talk about the theory and the understanding of what affects what and how we can break past some of the limitations that are imposed by us. So, so let's talk about timing. Time chart, okay. Let me bring up my... I think... Want to duplicate... I clicked too fast. It's gonna bring in some examples for timing charts. I sure hope y'all are familiar with timing charts. If not, you're about to be very familiar with them. And this is something, again, like if... And not that everybody needs to use, like, timing charts, but I do think that the art of timing and understanding timing and how to communicate it is very important. Charts, charts, charts! Let me just color code a little bit. Okay. I don't think timing charts are something that I mean, I used to fill out X sheets in school, and I mean, X sheets are still kind of used, but you know, stuff changes. I can understand if, you know, timing charts are. I think for me, it's just about visualizing timing, right? Like, you don't have to use timing charts, but I think being able to visualize the timing you want is important. Yeah. Okay. But let's talk about timing charts. We'll do a really simple one. So I'm gonna put down keyframes, and we're going to, let's see. Okay. So we got. So frame 1, then we're on frame 15. Okay. Now, basically, if you're not sure what a timing chart is, it's fairly simple. Now, timing charts, a lot of the times you will see them, you know, vertical, but for this, we're going to make it horizontal because we are going to transfer it basically to our timeline. So, oh, first I should probably move these little dudes so you can see the difference. It doesn't matter if they're not the same size, but I'm a perfectionist. Okay. This is also, oh gosh, I just wanted to move it in a straight line. Why can't I just, thank you. I make a lot of noises when I work too. You all are just gonna have to put up with it. Okay. So here we have, we're gonna move this up here. Make this a little bit bigger, okay. So we have frame 1, frame 15, and basically if I wanted to have, I think it was 5 in-betweens, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I want to have 6 in-betweens on 2s. That's just like the basics. So I need to have 6 drawings in between here and here. And a timing chart is basically where are those going? Where are those going? So the visual marks represent the spacing of the drawings apart from each other. So I'm gonna, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's just something like that. More ease out. So I've chosen to maybe 1, 2, 3 ease out, and then like a fast, and then 1, 2. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. No, it was 6. It was 6. What am I doing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There you go. But I can kind of see like where the fast is going. I'm going, oh, I'm easing out, and then there's a fast, and I'm easing in. I want more ease out. Is this correct? It doesn't matter. It's what I want, and that's what matters. The whole thing about Toonboom and what I try to teach people is like, I'm not telling you how to animate. I want to try to help you get what you have in your head out onto the program. So now that I have this example of my timing chart, I'm going to take this one here, little top one, and I'm going to tween it. Now, a lot of the times, and like I said, this is highly dependent on where you work, what your style is, But, and I don't even think I'm using like the right, I don't even think I'm using the right curves. There's so many things. But a lot of people may use the ease in and ease out, something like this. And I don't even know if that worked really well, but it's less even. But like they will, you know, they'll use the Bezier curves and stuff like that, which, like I said, is all good. But if you are someone who, like me, has a really hard time understanding the Bezier curves, generally what I do is just make a timing chart, stick it on its side, and then mimic it. If I pull my tween, come back. If I pull my tween out further, that means my drawings are, like, I have more to choose from. They're, you know, closer. Oh, expand. There we go. Like if I was to choose 6 in-betweens from my original timing spacing, like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like that's not, like, these are all gonna be the same spacing because they're so squashed together, right? So you want to give yourself, then it all depends, you can give yourself a bigger sort of section, so you can go, okay, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you know. So we go, oh, that's, maybe this one's a little bit too favored, maybe we go here, you know. And then what you do is you take off the tweens, and you can stick it on 2s. Or, you know, you can put the middle on 1s if you want. That's also when you can kind of go like, oh, well, maybe I need more in-betweens. Like, oh, that actually stopped super abruptly. I need to adjust it. But that is ultimately what you're trying to do. For me, again, just like with that whole, like, if you touch like on the peg, like touch everything underneath it, my sort of like rule of thumb in my head that I follow 99% of the time is I don't let the tween choose my timing for me. And I don't mean that in the sense of like, I think you're not doing it right if you don't do that, but it's to remind me that I want to be mindful of the timing that I put in. And like, if the computer does, like, I put Bezier curves on like camera moves and stuff like that, it's just to like make that choice of, yes, I want that timing, yes, it works for me. But if you're someone who likes to use timing charts and find that your Toon Boom stuff is a little bit like too kind of floaty or tweeny, or it looks mechanical, you want to crunch it up a little bit, this is what you do. Because like, I don't use the Bezier curves at all. Like, I just do straight up tween, and then I use my timing charts. And that doesn't mean necessarily I'm done, right? Like, just because I knock in some timing and take a look at what it looks like doesn't mean I'm done. I'm gonna analyze it. I'm gonna go like, oh no, that's, you know. So I'll do a different example. I was gonna do 3 different speeds, but like it doesn't really matter. So with the same timing, actually, I'm gonna show a little bit about, like, you know, let's talk about squash and stretch, right? So let's say, we're gonna move you down so I can zoom in a little bit more. All right. Also, I hope cool 26 of you watching. That's more than I thought. All of you are great. I hope all of this is making sense. Because man, if you can get these concepts, if you can do the timing thing and then understand pegs, you are powerful. Like, that's everything I talk about comes back to ultimately like these 2 things, because the using timing charts and traditional animation principles isn't just good for getting the timing you want as an animator. It is also integral to fixing the flips and stuff like that. Oh, I don't accept raids. Oh, I didn't. I remember Twitch newbie. I will I will correct that next time. I've been told. Oh, I see. I'm just learning to put little bingly bops up on my my screen for people. But I will look into that. But thank you for sending me raid from your heart. Yeah, Spazzoid Bunny is my good friend who's holding my hand through my tech issues today. Okay. So let's go into the like idea of like keyframing. And again, this is something I'm going to repeat like later on. I'm going to touch on the subject now. But you know, we're going to go into it more in depth, especially with characters. But generally, when I start to keyframe things, I still use this method. I need to get my timing chart, because what if, I know, we have sad. Change from happy to sad. Now, Toon Boom can't in between cells because it's a drawing. What it can in between is the movement on the peg, but unless the face is separated into its own little individual drawings with individual pegs, this thing is just gonna pop from happy to sad at one point. And you as an animator need to go, when does that happen? If we, let's say, I'm just gonna do a really slow ease out. Okay. Also, some of you are noticing that I'm just kind of like grabbing keyframes and dragging them. Ultimately, when you see me do that, I'm doing the timing chart in my head. I just know how to micro do it in small sections. But I'll kind of show you what it looks like. So currently we got this little friend. Shoop. Stop. Let's repeat. So you notice how it pops at the end here. That's what Harmony does. That's what Toon Boom does. It's like I am between it, and then the cell changed on the frame you wanted it to change, which was the last one. What happens if we change it earlier? Come on now. I mean, it's fast, so it's not the best example. But ultimately, what you're trying to fix is the cell pop. It is much clearer with things like hands, things that have wildly different shapes. But because cells don't in between, they can only pop from one to another. When a cell is close enough, like our spacing is small. When your spacing is small, if you have flips, if you have things rotating incorrectly, if you have, like I said, all that little fuckery that we were dealing with in the beginning, if you have that in your workflow, when your cells are close together, everyone can see it. Like, it's so hard to fix it because your spacing is small. However, when your spacing is large, that's where you can swap from one thing to another, with the distance helping you cover that pop because it's moving fast. You hide it basically in this large space. So one thing you're gonna hear me repeat in later later lessons when we get into keyframing and really breaking out keyframes is find the middle. I am always using timing charts and understand my timing, because if I don't know where this is. And if I don't know where that is, I can't fix flips, I can't fix cells, and my job becomes harder. So that's kind of a core concept in understanding your timing that you need to have as a tool in order to adjust the things that can be a bit of a pain in the ass, right? Like Toon Boom can't do it for us. It's the same if something flips, right? Like I'll just make it a quick 3/4 front. Where are we? Me zoomed in way too much, which is also something I like to do. Okay, so let's say I what? Why are you not flipping? Whatever. Whee! I flipped it on the drawing, which was not correct, but either way, Toon Boom does not do flips. I also think my peg is 3D path. That's why. That's fine. But yeah, when you flip something horizontal, I mean, you're basically just flipping a flat piece of paper. You know, like your brain goes like, no, it should rotate towards us. No, you gotta remember, it's a flat thing with a flat peg, and it does not rotate. Okay, that's the illusion. So how do we fix that? Well, you can either do it with a lot of master controllers and perfect rotations and like yoked out rigs, and even then it's a pain because it technically still doesn't do the thing. It's just easier to cheat it. But if you have a good timing chart and you know where that gap is, you're good. I'm not going to go more in depth with this. This will be like a good sort of warming up the brain. But we will apply this more with full characters in the next lesson. But for now, what I want to do is basically go through a bouncing ball, which is, you know, regular stuff. But I really want to hone in this idea of using our timing charts and visualizing our timing. What time is it? Okay, I got an hour. Oh my gosh. Like we're making good time. Hopefully I'm not going to... Why don't I take a break right now and see if anybody has any questions or wants me to repeat anything I've gone over up until this point. I might as well do that before I jump into the bouncing ball. Everybody's favorite, the bouncing ball. Well, now, there's probably a lot of questions for sure. Well, now you go ahead and ask me the questions now. We'll take a little mental break because it's been an hour. Okay, well that's fine. I'll still answer your question. It'll still be a good little mental break. Okay, so for slow motion, I normally put a front head in there. So I'm going to be going over flips next lesson, but ultimately what I do is, let's go into my timing chart. Like the thing about Toon Boom, or like about head turns in Toon Boom, is like you have your, you know, like 3/4 front to 3/4 front, and then you have your front, right? But the thing about the front on view though is that technically it is still going to flip in between one of these, right? Like that classic middle sort of view is a used example a lot. But what I find is like, yeah, I'll stick in a middle, but then I will in between that middle with like this side and get, like if I was to do like the head turn timing chart of like do like that. So instead of getting this middle one, I'm gonna get this one and that one instead. So I use the middle to start, but I only use it to get the proper keyframe that then in betweens with either side. So for Toon Boom, my key process, and I really go in depth in this like later on, but like the head turn is like the easiest example. This is why I always say find the middle. This is why I'm always like, find the middle and then get the key on either side. So when you ease out, there's no flips, and when you ease in, there's no flips. Until you get that, your keys aren't done. If you like, I'll do my antics, I'll do my overshoots, I'll do my breakdown keys, but this stage here where I basically I fix my flips is part of my key stage. I don't leave that for animation. I try to do that as soon as possible to, so I know that there's not like a mess up I'm gonna fix. Okay, so timing charts. Yeah, timing. Okay, straight up, seeing timing charts is going to be confusing if you've never used them. What it is basically is like animation is made up of well, many principles, but one is timing and spacing basically. And timing well, I'll do spacing first. Spacing and timing, let's do that first. Spacing is the space in between your drawings on the camera basically. And that's where the closer drawings are together, the slower things are, and then the faster they go, the further they're apart. And that's an example of spacing. It's the, there's very little space and much larger space. And this gives you, as the animator, like control over the how it moves. It helps you move, it gives that illusion of life, right? So when we're doing a timing chart, instead of drawing out the spacing we want, we're doing a representation of the spacing we want. So I can, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 6 drawings here that kind of get faster as they go. So my timing chart would look like bump, 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 like that. So what it is to tell you as the animator, like, okay, this is the motion. My spacing as I'm drawing has to get bigger. Now, when you actually, the numbers of it oftentimes come from the frames. Where is your first keyframe on? Frame 1. Where is your keyframe going? Frame, 15. But timing charts can be used for individual things, and that's where sometimes you will see multiple timing charts, like maybe a timing chart for the body. I'll just keep it vertical for, simplicity's reasons. But like, let's say this is the body's timing chart, and the arm's timing chart within it is actually the opposite. So this is something that takes some practice, but that's all. Okay, so that's spacing. Now, once we have these, how do we translate that to timing? What is timing? Well, timing is how we arrange these things on the timeline, right? I may have 6 drawings, but how do I arrange them on the timeline? Are they on ones, which means they have no in-betweens? It's just like, all back to back like this? Or are they all on 2s? Or maybe a combination. Maybe this settles on 3s. So you can take your drawings and the spacing is going to communicate something, but then how you can go another step further and it's going like, okay, now I'm going to take that and arrange it within like the software. This is the 24 frames a second thing, whether you want something on 2s or 1s, that's your timing. So it's the combination of both of these things, both the arrangement of the drawings and the spacing of the drawings themselves, that get you closer to the acting and the movement and the weight and things like this. But it takes practice. So don't worry too much about not like getting it right now. but take away that concept of visualizing what your animation is. Also, when I do the bouncing ball, I'm going to be drawing like directly on the pathway. So if you find that timing charts are like a little too vague for you, if you draw out your arc and your path of motion, draw little ticks on that path to help represent where you want your timing to go. We do need that in Toon Boom. We have to retrain our eye to timing and spacing, because I guarantee you, if you draw over top, you will realize like, oh, this is way off. I'm just looking at the questions. So, Box Divvy, I hope that answered it. A little bit about myself. So I did a little intro, but there's more people now here than before. I've worked in the animation industry in Canada for about 15 years now. I've worked only at Mercury Filmworks, mostly on Hilda, I would say is like the number one show that like I've put a lot of work into. But I animated on The Lion Guard and Tangled, and I've also done a lot of training, not just within the studio, but I taught Toon Boom at Algonquin College. I love doing lessons and master classes on this to make it a little more accessible. So yeah, I know this like the back of my hand. Okay. I noticed that a lot of animation can be done by lazily doing two in-betweens right next to keyframes. The super fees in adding an anticipation overlap, and you can animate 70%. Yes. I mean, I also we all have our formulas. And I think we should all know how to do a good, like, 7 out of 10. You know, like, don't give 100% all the time. Like, you need to know what to get away with. Like, I can go ham with my animation and I can give you like a singing scene that I spent forever on, but I can't do that all the time. And sometimes I have to see like what I can get away with. And then when the supervisor says, hey, you're being too formulaic, you gotta break it up, you don't default as much, I'll be like, okay, but deadlines be deadlines sometimes. So Paleo Draw said, do you typically animate the keys on 2s and then tween it, or is it situational? So generally what I do is, and we will get into this a little later, but the way my method works is that I start with my extremes and I work my way in. So I'll do like, let's say my 2 main poses, and then I'll go, okay, well, what's the next important pose? And then I tween those and I get something and then I work on it. I use my tweens as a base. Past my posing, I don't use anything from any master controllers except to like kind of in between from. And that's because like once I've gotten my posing done, like it's the family. Family's probably not the right way to put it, but like if I always use my tween as a base to get a little bit of movement, a little bit of flexibility. If I'm making a new pose or a new keyframe, I don't like to start from scratch. I always want to start with like a little base of movement. So I will tween stuff, knock down a keyframe, and then do my pose on top of that because it gives me like a little bit of movement. It takes care of if you do something on a peg, you got to do everything underneath it a little bit. It takes care of that for me. So I will say I always, big poses, tween them. I tend to get my keyframes. So that's my base. And then I will always, change the expression, change the perspective, add squash and stretch, all that kind of stuff. So it is situational. But I think, let me just check my lesson plan. Okay. So my lesson plan is like next week, it's gonna be going over basic keys like antic, overshoot, settle, and a head flip. And then after that, the third week, I'm gonna be going over like body mechanics and offsetting actions and really fleshing out your keys. So Slow Motion asks, do you ever chart out different parts of a character or generally the whole character in one chart? So as much as I push timing charts, I I only use it for my core actions, and I kind of tend to have it in my head of what I want the secondary actions to be. So for me personally, I don't go in that deep, but that's because I automatically do it a lot in my head. I think that if you are not used to it and you're not used to like flipping and like you have things exploding, it would be good to chart out the important secondary actions, because stuff like arms flip, stuff like legs flip. This idea of like finding, you know, the fastest part of the action is done by understanding timing, and it's going to be applied to everything, right? Like it's going to be applied to a whole body flipping, but it's also going to be applied to maybe a forearm flipping, right? Which is not hard to fix, but you know where to fix it. So you have to understand what timing you're going to use for that hand motion. So I would say that's up to you. I haven't gone that deep into it, because the other thing about Toon Boom 2 is like once you knock out these keyframes, you can play it immediately and see if it's the timing that you want. A lot of times like I'll just kind of fuck around and like move things and play it to get the time that I want. So I am a little experimental too. I'm not someone who knows exactly what I want all up front. But if you just have like your basics to understand where to fix the flip, then that's the key. So you actually have the formulas. I noticed Hilda has those rapid ease ins and very soft ease outs, or something like Kid Cosmic almost snaps from pose to pose. And I was curious how that stuff is tracked and explained to the animators. Oh, cool question. Okay, this is Shop Talk. I love Shop Talk. And then I will get into like Bouncing Ball. But okay, Kid Cosmic. A lot of my friends were on Kid Cosmic. I was not on it. I just admired it from afar. They were very specific and super cool with like the timing they wanted on it, and they wanted like threes and like a lot of step timing, and really. It is cool that you see the difference, right? A lot of the Hilda style, that's definitely like Andy the director's style. He is so precise in his movements. Also, a lot of Hilda is also how I animate, because I was the animation director for a long time, so it was like that just naturally kind of happened. But ultimately, how it is tracked and explained to the animators ideally would be, you know, through the director and the production with proper onboarding. So when you're working with other, like, you know, a place in Burbank, you know, they will send up things like, well, like with the kid team, like they sent up examples of animation they liked. They sent up examples like of do's and don'ts, how to draw the characters. I find Craig McCracken's team, like on his shows, have really great model sheets and examples. They're like top notch. They're good stuff. But like they are precise. So if you have precise expectations of your animation team, like the Craig McCracken shows do, right? Like those storyboard artists, like they have particular timing that they want. You got to hit that pose right when the board hits it. There's like no deviation. So generally, you know, you get your animation team. They have never done this style before, but you know, you have meetings, you have onboardings. They always need to be longer than they end up being. I think we all wished we had like a month to really dig into the style and experiment. But it is done through the directors of the team pitching and mentoring, hopefully, their team. It can go wrong where there are some studios or situations, that is human error, it happens, where people don't understand that different changes in style has different expectations and different challenges. So sometimes you'll have a situation where a style will change, but they don't give you diddly squat. They just go, okay, sit down, here's a brand new style, wait, what are you doing? Why are you animating like that? Wait, what? It's like, my dudes, you didn't tell us. So it can definitely happen. which is why it's tricky. I've been on shows where I've had a really hard time with the style change. After a while, it gets easier. There's still styles I'm not great at, but they don't make me want to put my hair out like they used to. But yeah. So, okay, cool. I think that's all the questions. Okay, Okay, 214. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so let's kind of put this knowledge into a basic bouncing ball, which is kind of boring, but like bear with me. Because it is all in the visualization. And just like how animation teachers are always like, go back to the bouncing ball, for me it's sort of the same, but in the sense of the technique you are using on this bouncing ball, and not like the animation itself. Oh, I need that. And delete all of this. Okay. We're gonna make our timeline a tad cleaner. Okay. I'm just gonna put a little dot. Ooh, a little dot there, just to kind of help. So, first thing you want to do is draw in your path of action. And honestly, I mean, I don't draw everything all the time. Like, just disclaimer everywhere. I don't draw everything all the time. But it does make a difference. Up front, drawing, up front planning, especially with Toon Boom, makes a world of difference. I know in animation, like my teachers always harped on us about like having our X sheets prepped and making sure we don't just dive into our animation without thinking about it. And I was bad at that. I was really bad at that. I was forced to be good at it because of Toon Boom, because I didn't want to have headaches every time I went to go do my twins. So time to be picky on my arcs. That was close enough. Okay. So this is where I'm like, you don't have to always use like the traditional timing chart. You can just yeah, whatever. And the thing is it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be like I used to be so worried about not always being 100% about what I was planning. Plan something. Intent matters, but you don't need, even a basic intent is intent. You have to be able to, especially when you're starting out, allow yourself to experiment and make mistakes and try things. And yeah, doing this is fine instead of the chart. What matters is the visualization, because your eye will not work the same way with Toon Boom that it does when you're like in front of paper or something, especially with posing. So okay, so the first thing I do is I work with my main poses. So let's keyframe frame 1. We're just gonna start here, and then I'm going to put it just right here, boop, boop. Just in its perfect little form. Miss Frizzle, honestly, I wish. She's so amazing. Okay. So now I'm going to get, generally, you know, I kind of work in halves. So I'm going to do those two, and then I'm going to do the squash position on the ground. Now, I would use the rule of using like the highest peg. There's only one peg, so it makes our job much easier. We'll have a lot more later on. Oh, oops, see, I didn't make its own peg. Bad me. Undo. Okay. So, bump, bump. And I'm just gonna copy, paste this, move it over here. Bonk, bonk. Okay. So now, and so the principle of it, it's the principle. Could I take this and manually move it, like one by one, and straight ahead it? Sure, I could, but I'm not. You know, we're gonna tween. But this is where you go, oh, well, that doesn't really work on an arc, does it? So even in this, you know, example here, the tween will often not give us what we want. It will give us some of what we want. There is some stuff here that's good. Like if I was to, like using my timeline like a timing chart, I want to use something, I'm just going to go on frame 2 because I want it, you know, to favor the first one. But if I want to get, let's see, this one. I got 1, 2, 3, here. So I'm just going to stick a keyframe down. Now, I don't throw it out even though it doesn't do 100% what I want, because there is information I do want, which is the squash and stretch, right? Now, if there's multiple pegs, you may have one peg flipping, one peg maybe going off the arc, maybe it's a master peg, but underneath that peg, you'll have squash and stretch, you'll have rotation, you'll have deformer movement. We have to make sure that like we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So use your tweens to get your in-betweens, but don't settle for it. So, you know, here I have retained a little bit of what I want, and now I can just rotate it and just put it back there. And now you can see, even though I've moved it, when I tween it, like it's still, again, not quite on the arc. But that's okay. I can now, I'm just gonna move this out. So I did get this one, now I'm gonna get that one. Around there. Okay, and then I'm gonna get 2 E's out. Now I have this. Now granted, if I really want to be picky, like I would also move this up a little bit. Because technically it'd be like a little bit off the arc. But like, you know, when you get to your ease outs and ease ins, when your timing is getting very close together, ideally you wouldn't have to adjust as much. That's why you got to work your, you know, main poses, keys, breakdown keys, and as you go through your animation, you kind of flesh it out. So let's do this. Oh, oops. Come on, get over here, you. Okay. So because generally I kind of do the fastest part first, right? Because that's the extreme. So I already have my down. It's going to bounce up right away. So my next one is this one right here. And this is how even just with like marking it down on the screen, you can even test, because like sometimes when you put a tween on and you're like, oh, I'm selecting something, here, I'm just gonna move this out even further. Okay, I'm on frame 11. If I go to frame 12, I'll get a keyframe that's right beside this one. And I put down a keyframe, but it's like, oh wait, that spacing's still too big for what I wanted. You always have to check the spacing of the keyframes, you know? And this is why kind of dragging out your tween to get different spacing helps sometimes, right? Because sometimes you have to get really subtle with it. Sometimes you need a lot more. So we're gonna go right there. Skewing is my best friend. I love skew. I love this. I love this. Do this all the time. It's fun. Okay, and now I'm going to do from here down, because I like to know how my slowest one moves. We're gonna do right there. So every keyframe I'm putting down, I'm doing based off of timing chart. Right? Again, no Bezier curves, just it's even spacing, so I can put down that keyframe wherever I want. Okay. So I put a keyframe on either side of the top here. And adjust it on the arc. Boop. My not great arcs. It's fine. It's fine. And flipping. We love flipping. Okay. So I'm going to take the ones that I fixed and shift them down. Well, let's just take a look at what it looks like so far. Why not? I haven't tested it yet. Let's see what it looks like. I know what my hang time is. Right here is where it slows down. It may be a little bit too much, honestly. Bonk, bonk. It sticks a little bit because there's no frames, but okay, it looks fine. I'm gonna... So here's another thing you can do. Oh, Box Divi, flipping in this instance is a good question because I've used the word flipping to refer to the actual, like, this thing. There's also, I say flipping to as basically my F and G key. Flipping also means this, which is kind of like flipping paper. You know, like I learned on paper, so when you want to check the spacing and of your drawings, you have to flip the paper back and forth really fast in order to like see it move. So I do this a lot too, which I also refer to as flipping. That's a good question. So yeah, so what you can do, I find sometimes with Toon Boom, or you know, with any sort of program, where you get to the top of your arc and you can put a keyframe on either side of it. Sometimes when I use, you know, important poses or important keyframes, sometimes they are just in to get me an in-between and then I eat them. And tops of arcs are often kind of contenders for being just like weirdly stuck, even if you time it out. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a keyframe on either side of my middle and then take the middle out. And this is something I do all the time with my poses because I'm not posing it to be a final frame of animation. I am posing it to get peg information that I need in order to in between with. And this is something we're really going to talk about next lesson, where we're going to talk also about like analyzing posing and analyzing your scene to set you up for success. Because a lot of how I work also has to deal with that. But it's good to remember that just because you have it on screen, you know, maybe it's a little too extreme. Maybe you don't like the pose anymore and you water it down with an in-between and you delete the original. So I'm gonna take this off. Okay, and then I'm just gonna, this way. Bonk, bonk. I'm just gonna do a quick little exit. And on screen so it plays a little bit better. Yeah. Bonk, 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 bonk. So at this point, you're now pencil testing, right? A lot of the times when people are like, oh, okay, like I'm done my animation and finished. No. Getting it moving is your pencil test kind of stage. At least when it's simple. You can definitely have the time to like go in and dig. But this is where you can kind of play around a little bit more, where it's like, well, what if? And this is where timing and spacing like really comes into play, because it's like, okay, well, what if I put between here and here on ones, and then what if I really push the hang time? What if I put that on threes and then put that on ones? And then what does this look like? Bonk, bonk, bonk. You know, it's got a little bit more rhythm to it, right? Because your spacing can be one way if played on twos, but as soon as you stick those twos together on ones and maybe, you know, you get threes instead. I mean, if you want to put it on twos, I can just tween it and, you know, stick some on twos. But this is where you as an artist are, you know, experimenting and playing around. And it could just mean like, okay, well, I need to reanimate in between here and here pops a little bit too much, like I will say. What if I want to take frame 25 and frame 27? And if I put one right in the middle, I feel like it's gonna slow it down too much. So how about instead I take frame 25 and I just like eke it, use my spacing, not my timing, to smooth it out a little bit. So I'm gonna take this frame, put a tween on it, and you know, just tween between this and the next frame, and I'm just gonna choose a keyframe a little bit down the path. Okay, I'm gonna keyframe, and then I'm gonna erase it. Okay. You know, now is the spacing between here and here, it's not as big, but I don't have to like redo anything. So oftentimes I'm like, oh, the spacing doesn't work. Oh, that's fine. I just in between it and choose a different in between, and that will reflect, usually at this point, all the work I've put into it. The squash, the stretch, you know, making sure that things aren't like messed up and stuff. All that kind of jazz. So yeah. So I do, if you want to practice timing charts, if you want to practice not using the Bezier curves, regular bouncing ball is totally where it's at, because this is the technique that I will keep coming back to. And yes, Box Divi, we will be going over some of it. Now, a lot of this info will not stick. Like I'm barraging you with information. These are things that come with practice. And some people are going to pick up some techniques right away, and then other people will pick up on techniques a little later. But I am recording this. I do want to put it up to a YouTube channel, probably like unedited, because I'm not good with that. But it is something that is a skill to practice, and it takes a few times. It does get easier with application, but you know, like with anything, it's going to go over your head until you start digging into it. Me telling you all this is nothing, and you're all going to go, you know, open up your program and go, wait, what was that again? You know, which is how I learned. So that's normal. um yeah, I it will be in for 7 days, the Twitch video on demand, but I'm a Twitch noob, so I don't know how long. But I will try my best to make these accessible, because these basics are really good, and you're not going to learn it like overnight. It's going to take a little bit of practice, but your foundation after that is going to be so strong. Like nothing will scare you. Okay. So that's our boop, boop. Okay. So what? Actually, that was okay. That was most of the lesson. That was all the lesson. Going through, because it's been an hour and a half, which is actually pretty good. I was worried it was going to take a little bit longer. But yeah, that's perfect. Okay, cool. Well, then I will take questions again for anyone who... A little bit of practice means 3 years of practicing and several buckets of tears. I mean, I can't disagree with you, because I did not get comfortable with Toon Boom until I was working in the industry. And even then I was like on my 3rd show. I don't think I really got comfortable with the program until I was an animation supervisor, and I had to go into other people's scenes to fix stuff. And then you get used to it. That's the Wild West. But it's little bits at a time. And I think one of the biggest things people do is, and rightly so, kind of rush past the basics, and especially with like full character rigs available, they'll go like right into the full character rigs, and then these things explode and they don't understand how to fix it, and it becomes such a frustrating process. And then I've heard a lot of people who are very, you know, discouraged by their experience, because they're like, it's such a struggle to get what I want. Is it always going to be this way? And I remember feeling that way too, and really struggling with this. And I do break it down to like a lot of core concepts. It's like, yes, you know, animation skills like to do with it, but I think you have to be clean and boring with Toon Boom first. You really have to, if you want to do more than just kind of like futzing with your own stuff for fun. Like if you want to be like fast and competent and be able to jump in and not be intimidated, it is the basic node view understanding and how to have a clean workflow technically that makes all the difference. People can do amazing, like I've seen people do gorgeous animation harmony, like amazing, beautiful. But I also know when I open up, it's going to be broke, which is good for individual like projects. Like when I'm working on my own project, like held together by like miracles and band-aids. People were asking me, I did an animation of Taco from the Adventure Zone once. So people were like, can I have that rig? And I was like, no, not because I don't want to share it, but because it's nonsense. It's nonsense. But when you're working in a studio, deadlines are tight, especially within TV animation, and you want to get some joy from it. You want to make sure your job is an 80% fixing these things that we've gone over today, because boy howdy, I have seen just the lack of understanding of what a flip is. Like flipping, like having something not animate and then kind of, you know, going weird towards the camera. That's not technically a mistake. You moved the thing in some way that made it do that. So it's understanding that like we're responsible for our workflow. Like it's the control of the program, right? If you look at it and you go, I don't know how to get something good, you can have the nicest animation, but if it's a studio animation, they're gonna go, ah, compositing is gonna go, what'd you do? So yeah, and I think like things like Q Cosmic are such a great example, that like, yeah, we don't, it doesn't need to be on ones, it doesn't need to be tweens are great, tweens are fantastic to be sustainable and have a lot of upfront work pay off at the end, but it's more than that. The tween is just our base. It's the spacing of our pose. Because if you put something on, like, I'm going to talk about a lot of things. I have a lot of things in planned for the next little bit. But, using threes is complex in the sense because you need your pose to do the work of three in-betweens, which means the way your body is offset, the way the mechanics are offset in order to communicate that visual information is more complex. And it's challenging in a fun way. I think it's really good, but you rely less on tweens. The more I've gotten into animation on Toon Boom, the less I rely on tweens as a final animation product, and the more that like I just use it as like, gets me 60% there and I do the rest. Just looking through. Oh, the next lesson, Paleo Dry. Yeah, it's gonna be same time, same place, Monday 1, 2, 3. I will leave the recording in my video on demand on Twitch so people can watch it. I am recording it myself, but I have terrible luck with recording, where it's just like, oh, this didn't work, or this is corrupt, or whatever. So watch it within the week if you want to make sure that you don't miss it. But I do have time off of work, so I do really want to make sure that I am uploading these so that they are accessible. And please, if you recorded this, or maybe you can, I should have said this at the beginning, I meant to. I don't mind if you record the video on demands, if you make clips of this, if you pass this around, this is for free. Oh, I can download off of Twitch. Okay, great. I will do that too. Just in case. But like, this is free information. Like, I'm not teaching like, I've worked at Mercury my entire career, and I am going over things that I have trained people in, but they are not proprietary. I'm teaching you basics, and I don't think I've ever taught anything, even at Mercury, that wasn't based off of like traditional animation principles, the basics of knowing harmony, and then past that, it's about finding opportunities to push our skills and bring in more fun stuff and not wrestle with rigs as much. Yeah, I don't like the node that turns tween animation into twos. I mean, unless it's something that's a little more mechanical, like a door sliding open maybe, or like camera moves. But when it comes to character animation, I do think, and again, it is situational. I am teaching you all my tips and tricks and how I animate. But, some things are, you're so under the deadline, you have to do that. Or the expectations are that you do that. But it's good to know that that's not the only way to do that. I do find that scripts and technology, which are good. I loves me some good scripts, right? Like AI in the sense of scripting, of getting rid of some of the tediousness of the stuff. Those are cool. But I also think that we have gone a little too far in thinking that scripting, the way I kind of see it is that things have gotten so complex, we need these things in order to make it easier. Whereas like, oh, but what if we made it a little simpler? Like, master controllers are incredibly complex, but I can do the same animation without master controllers if I know how to draw the character and the rig is broken up properly, right? Like, I need to know what the character looks like rotated, But the rig is not the model. I draw the model. So I mean, master controllers are great, like again, especially with deadlines, but all these things are sort of made almost with the intention of like, oh, people don't have enough time to keep things on model or make things nice, so make sure that we have rigs that are perfect and never go off model. And I'm going, that's not how this works. You know, giving room to artists to understand the model, artists drawing on model, taking home the character sheets and drawing over them, understanding the proportions, understanding how you draw the character model. I love it. I love it when I see slight differences in character model. Like, I'm of that era. I enjoy it. I love seeing that in my team. I saw it when I was on Star versus the Forces of Evil, which actually a lot of my core team on the first season of Star ended up being on the first season of Hilda too. I think it shows, honestly. But each, the senior animators, they all do it a little bit differently. They all draw Hilda differently, so they all post her differently, and they all like moved her slightly. Like, and when I watched it, I'm like, oh yeah, this person did that scene and that person did that scene, and I love that. I love that I can see people within their scenes. And with Toon Boom, we need to like when using a rig, I shouldn't just say Toon Boom, but like with using a rig, we should encourage that and have room for that, because that is what brings it next level. Like, when people look, I won't get into in the weeds about like job stuff, but one of the reasons I can say that like Mercury has the certain reputation is the people on the shows push further past what they're asked to do and like what the model sheet says. Like, we had a team on Star Versus that drew model sheet or board poses, because it's like, we're new to the characters, how can we make them wackier, like how can we take this storyboard stuff that's like a little rougher but like figure it out. And that brought so much personality, because the model sheets again are not the character. They show you the proportions and stuff, but it is just a character standing and rotating, right? It's just a head moving up and down. It has no context to it. It has no acting behind it. It has no personality behind it. It can have an appeal, but like we have to add so much more to it, and it only comes with really digging into the traditional animation principles, right? And that's not to say like only do that, but it's in tandem a little more, I think, than what a lot of people expect. So master controllers are great for getting basic angles in the positions, but you still need to modify each frame. Yeah, absolutely. Patrick knows what's up. It is one of those things where, the way I see it, like, I'm in control of my poses. So oftentimes, like, I'll do a pose that I'm really happy, but I'm like, oh man, I need to tilt the head up a little bit. I then in between my pose with an up tilt of a head, but I take something that favors my original pose, because I don't want to lose all the work that I did on it. But you need both. I've used, can definitely work faster with non-janky rigs, but also understanding that a rig does not have to make or break your animation. You don't need too much to make a good animation. And gosh, what one it is. Okay, so these are the lessons. Before we end, I'll tell you about the lessons that I have prepared. Okay, so next week we're going to be going over posing workflow again, a little like more in depth. I'm going to be showing better examples and common fixes. But we're going to go over posing workflow, and then we're going to go over how to do a head flip correctly with a clean workflow, and we will reiterate the timeline like a timing chart. We will reiterate flipping and what pegs you're on. I'll reiterate keyframes, and basically I'll be taking you through how to fix flips. And the head flip is the perfect example. That's the one that everybody does, like whole bodies can flip, but we'll be doing a head flip next time. Lesson 3 will be, we're going to go a step up and do full body, and we're going to be talking about leading and following actions. So I'm not talking about follow through, like if somebody turns and like a ponytail follows. I'm talking about specific mechanical body offsets of like a torso leading or a leg leading and like pulling the body with it and fleshing out keys and settles more. So this is where we're getting into a way to use keys that's like more akin to traditional. I use a lot of traditional clips as like an example of keys, because to me keyframes are like, if you were to hand it off to someone, they know exactly what you want. But we're going to talk about like really fleshing out our keyframes in the 3rd lesson. The 4th lesson, we're going to dig into how to fix already done animation. So again, we're going to be going over stuff that we talked about today in order to, you know, practice having a scene that's already done and it's kind of messed up. How do you even go through and like readjust it? So I'm going to try my best to like fuck something up on purpose that we can fix, because it happens to me all the time. And I think the best thing for people to learn is to just like dig right in. So lesson 4 is going to be about like fixing animation, fixing your fuck ups, but also analyzing your boards and scenes and working with your extremes. I'm probably going to put that next week, but whatever. Then we're going to move on to lesson 5, which will be like run cycles, pegs, and how to put perspective on pegs too. So we're talking about runs and walks, and how to use pegs to have them come towards the camera, to pan, all that stuff, and how to make feet stick. I have a few tips and tricks to put your animation cycles on a peg and not have the feet slide, especially if they're walking in perspective. Okay, this is where Lion Guard put me through the ringer. Lesson 6 is going to be lip sync with keys. Keying out your lip sync so that you are treating the full mouth like you know, half the face. And we're going to be doing, I'm going to be doing like a shoulder up lip sync. So something that's more of like the Fuller Disney, like Tangled style, where like I'm working with like the eyes and the cheeks and stuff. And we're going to just talk about lip sync and non-cell lip sync animation for Toon Boom. And then lesson 7 is going to be applying the techniques that we're learning to snappier styles, doing wipes, and talking about 1, 2s, and 3s for timing. So we're going to talk about like, you know, a lot of my examples are going to be more, you know, kind of traditional Disney-ish or whatever, but we're going to talk about, like, I worked on Wander Over Yonder, like I said, on Star. I'm not the best at snappy stuff, but I know enough to give people some basics to play around with timing using, again, the stuff that we've gone over at this point. And then, okay, so I don't have any lessons after that because it depends on like what we're gonna do after. But I do want to possibly run some bonus lessons. Also, before I go, I do want to shout out that I am raising money for Extra Life. I have my little bar in my stream. Spazoid Bunny, if you could shout out our link, that would be great. Obviously, if you have a few bucks, that would be great. If not, no worries. I'm doing this for free, and like I'm like, I want to give it for free. But also, we're raising money for Chio, so take a look there. Also, important question. Sorry, Bellamon. Important question. Do you prefer more visual handlers and slightly clutter space, or could be several times to? I click B several times to find the correct peg because of the old version of Harmony I'm used to using. I am someone who actually doesn't work in peg select mode, which is something you should do. Where are we? What one is it? Peg selection mode. Yeah. So you should be working in peg selection mode, because what that means is if you click on your object, it like selects the peg. It doesn't select the drawing, but I select the peg, but I select the drawing because we didn't have that option back in the day. So my thumb automatically parents up like 20 times. Yes, there is a peg selection mode. It's so you don't have to parent up to the peg. So if you, it's your transform tool properties. You have a little thing called peg selection mode. And that way, it will always be yellow, so you are a good fella. All right. Well, with that, my friends, I will bid you adieu for now. I hope you can come next week. Again, like, I'm gonna try my best to like upload this, and once I do, like, pass it around, tell people they are free to grab it, to clip it, to pass it to whatever. It's fine. This is free, and I hope you all learned some stuff, and I hope to see you next time too. Thank you so much. I can't wait to do more of this. This was, despite the crazy tech stuff that I needed fun or help with, this was fun. Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye. So long. Farewell. Auf Wiedersehen. Adieu. 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 To you and your